Hello, very good day. Today we'll discuss about the role of ecology biodiversity expert in EIA report preparation. Means what is the main role of a person who is ecology biodiversity expert in the preparation of EIA or the contribution of EIA. So as we know that India is one of the 10 mega diverse or biodiverse country in the world, and we have already we must aware about that country is divided into 10 biogeographic region, and the diverse physical features and climatic situation these formed ecological habit like forest, grassland, wetland, coastal area, marine ecosystem, desert ecosystem, so which harbor also harbor and sustain the immense biodiversity. India's industrial rise is closely accompanied by a mounting problem pollution and the destruction of natural resources. Therefore, it is needed to have a strong policy to take care of our natural resources. And we have now amended in EIA 2006 and amended in 2020, but draft notification was not finalized. EV monitoring play a significant role to assess a negative impact on industrialization and transition. So it can be triggered by unprecedented loss of biodiversity, emerging appreciation of urgency, which covers the issue like to be addressed under conference of parties of the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity, since 2002. Several organizations has issued the guidance on the biodiversity and also including the EI like US CEQ 1993, CEAA 1996, the World Bank, Asian Bank, many things are there, and also there is sub CBD International Association for Impact Assessors. These are the organizations who issued the guidance on biodiversity. So there is some dimensions on biodiversity impact. It can be spatial, it can be temporal, it can be qualitative, quantitative. So, but methodologies we have already discussed about like what type of methodology for collection of baseline data. But environmental threshold for biodiversity is we under EIA as an EB expert working for sustainable development on the basis what is the rate, what is the scale of a magnitude or the time period, because this ecology biodiversity or the simply biodiversity impact are accountable for sustainable development of any type of development which are going to be happen on a piece of land. What are the objective for this this EB? So here you can see before going to develop under the design that is known as pre-project, sometimes you can say in the design scoping, design stage, we have to assess the changes in the biodiversity characteristic, the richness of biodiversity, their importance, or role. The composition of ecosystem can be defined in terms of richness, in terms of diversity. Spatial and temporal distribution can be defined on the resources-based structure. Some offset can be defined for future consequences. Impact can be defined, can be written down procedures like that. So under the EIA, the frequency is like starts from screening, scoping to the monitoring. But in this case, what type of baseline data for ecology biodiversity you need to create in terms of flora and fauna, we have already discussed. So there is a need to develop a sustainable type of plan, or because the action plan for promoting biodiversity conservation for every developmental activity, because we must aware about a cheetah or pink-headed duck. These have been extinct in the wild, not in wild everywhere. Now we don't have this type of species. So India is a mega diversity country, and here some threatened biodiversity hotspots are there with a tropical wilderness area. And as per IUCN, here more than 413 globally threatened species, which are about 4.9% in the world are found in India only. So the CBD, that is Convention of Biological Diversity, came into force on 29 December 1983. Now it is mandatory for all its signatory parties or countries to implement the provision of CBD. EIA is the most common approach where we can structure the things are biodiversity offset. But what is the missing exactly? That is BIA. We are doing EIA and presenting all the data in terms of air, water, soil, noise, but we are missing the BIA. So under CBD, here the CBD stipulates the techniques for biodiversity conservation under Article 8, 10, and 14. Under 8, promoting the production of ecosystem, natural habitat, maintenance of viable population. Under Article 10, calling for integration of biodiversity concern into the national decision making and measures to avoid or minimize adverse impact on the biological diversity of the area, particular area. The CBE also has under Article 14 that specifically calls for EIE or impact measures to ensure the biodiversity is addressed in all the projects, planning, etc. Also at policy decisions. So you can go for here is the link for this CBD. What are the things are available on this convention on biological diversity? You can see here. For the baseline information, we need to generate the inventory. We need to go for impact assessment on the basis of data, whatever we have collected from the baseline in form of flora and fauna. We have to prepare some map of the presence or absence. We have to calculate the quantitatively like species density, frequency, dominance, IVI, some type of richness, evidence, etc. And also we need to calculate, we need to have the ecological sensitivity of that area in terms of wildlife importance, flora endemicity, faunal endemicity, state of terrestrial vegetation, state of wetland vegetation, mangrove vegetation, conservation importance, legal status in terms of national park, wildlife sanctuary, reserve, forest, wetland, agricultural land, etc. Lakes, reservoir, etc. Swamps are riverine area, river, canal, breeding ground of migratory. It can be. These all these things we need to cover. The VEC valued environmental components, like in case of biological component, we need to have a charismatic emblematic species in that area, economic importance in that area, protected status of that area, rarity, endemic city, endangerment, susceptibility, or responsiveness to the defined impact indicator, umbrella species there, if any, then we have to record. Important ecological role like food chain or keystone species are there. Ability of consistent survey method, if we can do in that terrain, different terrain. So on that basis, we can go for VEC. And parameters we have already discussed, like parameters for EV, trees, shrubs, herbs, climbers, cultivated plant in the study area, floristic composition, medicinal plants, state of forest, their category as per champion and state, rare and indigenous species, endemic plant, under fauna, reptile, amphibian, bird, mammal, butterfly, red species, wildlife, their importance. So ecology biodiversity experts should prepare all these list, all these things on the basis of some interpretation preferences. Under EMP, because EMP is the important under EIA, this requires a sophisticated investigation and also analysis of potential impact on ecology biodiversity due to the developmental activity, what is in question. So this ecosystem approach is required that looks at potential impact on a particular area or ecosystem where your project should be located. Mitigation plans are required to compensate the loss of forest or vegetation cover, whatever is due to the obligatory compensatory forestation. So regeneration or restoration of rare plant, if any, then we have to provide a medicinal plants is required, medicinal wildlife species are required, documentation and production conservation. We have to provide delineation and implementation of pollution control measures to minimize pollutants due to air emission, noise, vibration, illumination, vehicular movement, wastewater discharge, change in land use pattern, and anthropogenic factor that have impact on biotic environment. So the identification of measures through scientific conservation plan for protection and conservation of plant for flora, for fauna, wildlife, migratory avifauna, rare, endemic, and endangered species, or threatened species that is known as red species, medicinal plant, etc. We need to cover compensatory forestation to compensate the deforested area, are the, we can say, the loss of biodiversity, identification of suitable native tree species under the compensatory forestation, polyculture, etc. Plantation of economically beneficial shrubs or tree, floriculture, green belt, in and around area. We have to provide as an EB expert under EMP. A development of green belt as per National Forest Policy, 33% of total land is required to develop green cover or green belt development. And the forest under reclaimed area, or we can say under compulsory forestry, it is required. So this type of things are required in the EMP for ecology biodiversity. The impact, if we see the impact, type of impact, which is already presented in chapter 4. So major, we have to go for the residual, avoided, and mitigated impact. So what are the anticipated? Anticipated can be residual, can be avoided, can be mitigated. So under this, mitigated means whatever we are going for mitigation, if we cannot avoid. If we cannot avoid, then we have to reduce. And the residual impacts will be there. On that basis, we have to prepare the offset so that no net loss of biodiversity can be there. Because as per the essence of EI, first we have to avoid. If we cannot avoid, then we have to go for minimize. If we cannot minimize, then we have to mitigate. So in that way, we have to think first. Avoid means avoided impact. Whatever we have to go for avoiding the things to do during the development, that is avoided impact. What are the residual? Residual should have means we can somewhat we can minimize, somewhat we can mitigate. Whatever we have to mitigate, that is mitigated impact. That is the way where we are going to mitigation. And whatever impact we cannot minimize, then we have to go for offset, compensatory forestry, etc. That is known as impacted offset. Under this, here you can see from making this type of approach, start from we can say avoided and mitigated, and making the offsets, biodiversity offset under the developmental activity. So this will have no net loss of biodiversity due to the developmental activity, either construction or some other activity. For ecological impact assessment, it can be applied to project a widely varying scale, and that may impact on ecological feature like irrigation, like mining, like highway, railway, etc. So the factors that are responsible for change in biodiversity structure can direct or can be indirect. Some direct factor like fragmentation, isolation, changes in land use, land cover, pollution, disturbance, introduction of invasive alien species, and indirectly like demographic, socio-political, cultural, and technological interventions are there in that area. So the design of impact assessment process should be able to take into account the full range of factors which are affecting the biodiversity. Here are the steps. First, assess the biodiversity value at the risk assessment, whatever it is from the baseline scenario. Then we have to go for calculation amount of biodiversity loss, that is known as residual impact. Under this calculation, then we have to select the best offset to be implied, and then determine the best size of offset, means how much size, compensatory, whatever we are going to design the conservation intervention for the biodiversity gain, then reach on some agreement, reach on some memorandum, then obtain some approval, and after approval, enter into the offset implementation process like conservation plan. If conservation plan is required, after approval of the conservation plan, you have to go for implementation of this conservation plan of particular area or industry area. Here, project characteristic and the ecosystem component, like under the project characteristic, we have to assess on the basis of location size, schedule of construction, operation, potential sources of impact, nature of emission, type of emission, receiving environment from the emission, like extent, magnitude, duration of disturbance, alternative for the site, if any, past, current, and future proposals, if any associated developments are there, we have to think about the project characteristic. For the ecosystem component, like naturalness, integrity, habitat quality, population variability, rarity, endangerment, extinction, genetic diversity, alteration in home range, beta diversity, gamma diversity, alpha diversity, resilience, feasibility, stability, conservation significance, uniqueness. These are the parameter where we need to look into the ecosystem components for assessing the impact, ecological impact. On the basis of these parameters, we have to predict the ecological outcome, ecological impact due to the developmental activity on a piece of land in that area. Then we have to prepare the offset. All the possible and probable impacts should be identified in the proper manner, whatever we have discussed here. Then mitigation measures should be provided with the proper offset. Impact on biodiversity are inevitable, of course. Project is located in, if it is located in sensitive area, so there will be a major impact. Then we have to go for alternative. If site is not sensitive, then we can go for mitigation measures of in that area only. If site is sensitive, then conduct independent biodiversity impact assessment, that is BIA, rather than making a part of EIA. So in that case, enlist all the aspects activity by which we are going for biodiversity to be affected are going to affect due to the developmental activity. Identify the impact, make a plan, enter into the offset, then prepare the biodiversity action plan, or it is also known as conservation plan for wildlife conservation plan in that area. Also prepare the green belt shelter belt development plan. It should be prepared under the part of this BIA. And we have to interact with the proponent. Also, we need to train the proponent that these are required and this is the mandatory to do. Here, the example of EMP for ecology biodiversity, especially. Some potential sources of pollution is required under from the call means from the source air, water, soil, noise, wasteland, land use pattern, or some others, if any, then we have to include potential sources. Then magnitude of pollution, what type of magnitude of pollution from the air, water, soil, noise. Impact, what impact will be on biodiversity will from the air, water, soil, noise, wasteland, etc. Then accordingly, we have to go for the control measures, cumulative measures. If measures are there, then because we need a plan. Then if plan is there, then resource requirement, budgetary requirement is there. If budgetary requirement or resource requirement there, then responsibility of some person is required to fix with some time frame, and who will monitor, which agency is going to monitor those things whatever we have fixed under the resource and control measures. So we have to prepare in this way the EMP for ecology biodiversity. Then evaluation phase means under the biodiversity, when we are going for BIA, the monitoring part, a third part, a last part, what impact will project have on genetic composition of species? Do major systematic population changes appear to be taking place? How will the proposal affect ecosystem processes? Is the proposal likely to make the ecosystem more vulnerable? Does the proposal set a precedent for conversion of a more intensive level of use of this area, land use area? Is the biological resource in question limited of its range? Does the species demonstrate adaptability? What level of confidence can be assigned for the interpretation? So these are the question where we need to find for biodiversity concerns area. Here under the green belt development or green cover, we need to consider these parameters. This means green belt or plantation criteria should be the part of EMP. It should be given by EB expert. Recommended plants for the for roadside should be different, for the green belt should be different, for the admin area should be different. So what are the criteria, selection criteria for the green belt? Here you can see on the basis of the gases pollutant. First, we need to consider the parameter tolerance toward the pollutant. PM, SOx, NOx, what type of parameters are, SC, VOC. Longer duration of foliage should be there. Freely exposed foliage should be there. Adequate height of the crown of these free, like in case of boundary, 15 meters height is required. Openness is of foliage and canopy. Big leaf, broad leaves are broad laminar surface is required. Large number of stomatal index is required. So these are the criteria for the absorption of the major pollutant, gas pollutant or air emissions. In case of suspended particle like PM10 to 2.5, then height and spread of the crown, leaves supported on the form petiole, abundance of surface on the bark of foliage, roughness of the bark, abundance of auxiliary hair, hairs and scales of laminate surface are stomatal index. We need to consider. Here is an example how the green belt should be uh, provided. It should be three-tier system should be there. First tier, second tier, third tier, and the tier system. The first tier toward the boundary. Here, the tree should height about 10 to 20 meter. 4 rows should be there. And the second, a middle layer, it should be small, having small tree of 5 to 10 meter. It has at least six rows for the middle layer. And third, toward the plant, it should have a shrubs or the tree, mix of tree, 1 to 5 meter. That height is 1 to 5 only, and it should be a thick like bougainvillea, etc. And here, for the roadside, it should be separate list. For the admin building, separate list be there. And calculation of the cost for the green belt, like cost of sapling, cost of for trees, this should be different. Half shrubs should be different. Transportation charge should be different. This should be a capital cost. For the recurring, like plantation cost, the cost of drip irrigation, fencing cost, feeding cost, soil moisture work, required for water required for irrigation, fertilization cost, security and vigilance. So all these things should come under the cost of green belt development. And here you can see the example of the green belt map, because this was asked. This is asked during your form to submission or EIA submission by the committee by the on the previous portal. So this type of green belt map should be prepared by the consultant, by the proponent when you are going to submit your EIA. Here you can see different type of height of different trees are there with different color we have presented, whatever is applicable for that project. Another part of this ecology biodiversity is to prevent conservation plan. So here you can see the conservation plan we have presented here. It has about 8 chapters. Under first, brief description of the project we have to provide. Under chapter 2, ecological profile means the baseline profile of the area. Under 5 kilometer, 10 kilometer radius is as per your TAR, standard TAR. Then you have to go for impact assessment on ecology biodiversity, whatever we have presented in this way, like what type of things are required for ecological impact assessment we need to provide here under chapter 3. 4 is on the local community. It is for the for the wildlife or ecology biodiversity. And chapter 4 is the impact on livelihood of the local community, like including CPR. CPR, the common property resources. So these are things we need to cover into. And after that, we need to go for changes in human wildlife interaction and risk of conflict. Chapter 6 about specific mitigation measure. Chapter 7 is about monitoring, and chapter 8 is about conclusion and bibliography. Are some annexes if you have. Here the attributes to check the criteria for means your ecology biodiversity or some area has covered all these things or not. So these are the questions, like if you go for one by one, you can see these the questionnaire only. By this question, by asking this question, one can easily review your EIA has this type of information or not. Like in case of impact area, then you have to ask 2 questions. In the location map showing biodiversity area is shown in EIA or something. Has the impact area described keeping in mind biodiversity impact? If yes, then that means it is provided. In case of baseline study, then you can ask questions like component of biodiversity has been covered. The information include the listing of endemic or red species. The applicable laws are applicable area. It is like seasonality has been mentioned. The importance of biodiversity element has been presented. What biodiversity expert involved in conducting the survey, method of collection has been standardized or not, secondary sources has been referred to, and what are the gaps. So these are questions baseline quality. So in that way, you can ask one by one that what type of questions do we require. Here we have presented the questions for criteria to fulfill our quality of that ecology biodiversity report, or even for EIA. Some challenges are in case of integrating biodiversity into the EIA. First one, lack of knowledge, lack of biodiversity data, lack of resource status, lack of clarity. Even for the TAR, in case of TAR, there is nothing about the biodiversity. They have presented only standard condition that you have to prepare the ecological status of that area, including if scheduled for animal, then you have to operation plan. That's all. So these type of things, this is the very generic, and it is for every sector. But it is not like that for every sector, because if you are going for some notified industrial area like GIDC and MIDC, then what will happen? There is nothing about no forest, no wildlife sanctuary, no anything, and even the forest area is the major question. There is no tree. Then what about the biodiversity study? So this type of things are there. Lack of inadequate budget even for, and some short timelines. We have to complete the EIA within very short period. Then how you can go for the biodiversity study? These are the major issues of today. We have to deal with. And what are the mitigation measures? Mitigation measures in respect to ecology biodiversity, like interfering as a little as possible in any area, either forest or any type of ecological sensitive area where the wildlife movement is there are seen. During planning phase, we have to have this type of things, also to train the minds who are going to execute the project. And also regular, or we can say regular monitoring should be there for area like avifauna, nesting of the birds, etc. So this there should not be any interventions. And also polluting the substance into the water course or estuary or riverine area, open sea. So this type of things should be restricted. It should not be done because this can hindrance. This can stop the fishing act. Means we can say disturb the marine flora, fauna, fish or aquatic population. And when a part of activity involve water level control, then changes in such levels should be programmed very advanced. And this should be means everyone should aware about that. Training should be provided to the workers, to the means in the operation phase who are working in this area to protect the biodiversity of that area in the sea or in the river. So here you can see what are the outcome of this ecological impact assessment. Because we know important thing is nowadays, as you can see, many disasters are happening due to the environmental changes. So it happens due to the fragmentation of habitat or biodiversity balance. So EB expert is playing a significant role in AI for studying the ecological status and ecological impact assessment. They should prepare the green belt, shelter belt, or plantation plan, and also they should prepare the conservation plan. They should pass the information, right information, to the proponent as well, so that they have to aware about this type of system, this type of things we need to care during the operation phase. So that's all for this session, small session on ecological impact assessment, how we can do EMP preparation and what the role and responsibility, etc. So that is the things. And if you have any question regarding this, so immediately you can ask. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.